we just live in a culture of women are just constantly told what we should and shouldn't be doing.
And that pressure is so real, right? And not only do we have it externally, then we have our own narratives and our own things that we say to ourselves that like either buy into that pressure or add more pressure. And it's really hard. And a lot of what I want to convey through this podcast is let's own our own journeys. Let's be proud of our own journeys. Yeah. Let's celebrate our accomplishments. Let's move away from comparison and just be really happy with where we're at. And for me, that was a real struggle, you know, because I was focused on the things I wasn't getting or the things that I wanted that I didn't have yet. I think for me, hindsight, like I have some of those things now. So it's easy for me to look back and be like, oh, why didn't you lean in more and enjoy more? So I think really just conveying this message of like, let's be where we're at. Maybe this is right where we're supposed to be and really lean into that. Really excited to welcome my next guest, Anne. And what's really special about, and I need to mention about having Anne here is she is the first woman that I spoke to about this podcast probably well over a year ago. Yeah. I think even when the podcast, it wasn't an idea to be a podcast. It was just about having conversation about egg freezing and you know, the journey through the 30s. And Anne's been amazing and always open and willing to talk and be vulnerable. So it was no question you had to be. I mean, even if you don't want to be, it's like you have to be on this podcast. So it's really important and significant for me to note that she has been amazing and a willing participant and supporter of this. And I just think that speaks to the shared passion we have for bringing this conversation more to the public, more to the audience, and just normalizing all of these things we're going to talk about today. So thank you so much for being here. Yeah. So before we dive into like the meat of the conversation, I want you to tell us more about you. Every woman on here is so incredible and so incredibly accomplished. So I want you to share who you are and all your accomplishments.
I found you, I guess, through the therapy world. I'm also a licensed mental health counselor in New York City. I had a ballet career as a ballet dancer before that.
Incredible. And that's a really intense world.
Yes, it is. Definitely shaped kind of where I am with everything today and some of the decisions I've made. But then before that, got a law degree.
Which I just learned today, like literally moments before. I already knew how incredible you are, but I just learned that new fact, which is a huge accomplishment.
Yeah, but bailed before the bar exam.
Why? Because I always think that's fascinating, because I'm someone that does that too, that like starts on the path, like sort of acknowledges and is aware, like kind of not for me. And I've been okay to like change paths or change courses. And I think sometimes people struggle with that they think they make a decision and they have to stay with that. So I think that's so incredible that you did that and then decided maybe not the right path.
Yeah, I think it was making big choices about what my life was going to look like when I was in my early 20s. I guess very in line with this like new, you know, developmental, emerging adulthood type thing. But I loved the education with the law school and whatnot, but just realizing I think I would have been really unhappy doing that. And I had this passion for ballet that has been there, you know, since I was 3 years old. And
3, oh my God.
And that's one, you know, that's on the clock too. The ballet career. Yeah. You don't get that in before a certain age. So I was like, if I don't do it
So there's like an end time for a ballet career.
Yeah. It depends. You know, some people stay in that world or dance for a very long time, but there's a bit of a clock there. Okay. Yeah. So realizing if I don't do this now, at least give myself the opportunity to just focus on this for a little while, that'll be that. So made that jump after law school to give that a go.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Gosh, great. Wonderful in so many ways. Wouldn't trade it for the world. Wonderful. I'm so grateful for all that time. But I just, when I turned 30, I was ready for a shift, which is when I launched into, you know, looking into getting my master's as a mental health counselor.
Yes, so tell us about that decision.
Yeah, so I had like late 20s, I had some really great work artistically for my ballet career, like things I, you know, never thought I would achieve like this late in life in a ballet career. I was just excited, kind of checked it off the list. And then, you know, also had some experiences of just starting to think about just kind of observing how these like beautiful, young, talented women were being treated in that world of ballet, which is, like, you know, a whole nother podcast and a whole other can of worms.
I'm sure.
And I was just like, I don't, something about it just shifted for me. Around the same time, my grandmommy died too, so I was just thinking a lot about that identity. Life. So really had this moment of, who do I want to be as a woman in my 30s?
I love that question.
Yeah.
I love that question. Yeah.
And as much as ballet, my first love, I couldn't reconcile who I wanted to be and just kind of the world and the culture of the ballet world. So
I think it's so powerful to have that moment of clarity to like reflect and ask yourself those questions. And I think there's a lot of messaging that might not give us the space to do that sometimes, to pause and say like, what do I really need? What do I really want? Yeah. Who do I want to be?
Yeah. And I think kind of digging super deep into the values, it's rough. I wish I could say I could change the culture of the ballet world, but I'm probably not going to do it anytime soon. So just making choices to have to realign, but so grateful. And, I did it all on my terms and have found something that with the therapy that, I love it just as much. So really lucky.
Yeah. It's incredible work. Work. And you are just transitioning to your own private practice.
Yes, I am. Yes. Yeah. I'm in the throes of that. Finally got my license. And, so that's, I never in my 20s, if you had said I would figure out how to establish a PLLC.
Oh my God, isn't it so overwhelming? I know.
Be my own business owner. It's just so cool that it's all brought me here.
Congrats. And we'll, at the end, you'll give us your website and how people can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, okay, of course.
So let's dive into sort of where our conversation started with the egg freezing. And if you could share your journey with that, how old you were when you froze, what brought you to that decision, some of the things we've already talked about, but to share with the audience.
Yeah. So how old am I now? I'm 35 now. Okay. I did it when I was 34. So gosh, it's almost coming up on a year now. I believe I went in, I can't remember if I was 33 or 34 when I initially went in and had them check my fertility, that initial appointment of.
And what drove you to do that? Were you just sort of thinking, I'm this age, kind of want to just have the information and know where I'm at? Okay.
I feel like for me, and I think a lot of women feel this, or at least this is what I've heard, is when you hit 30, you kind of start thinking about that. Yeah. And fortunately, I never had a gynecologist to, slip me the pamphlet at age 30 for egg freezing.
We just had a guest on, and this was new to me because when I froze at 37, I'll be 42 next month, so almost 5 years ago, there was no conversations about it. I only knew one person that had done it, but one of the guests had shared that was her experience. And the gynecologist, and they were saying in their 30s, they're being ushered into this conversation now. And I'm like, wow, there wasn't even a conversation to be had when I was doing it, but also feeling that wasn't really kind of the right way, or she didn't appreciate that because it felt like I'm not thinking about that yet, but now should I be thinking about it?
Yeah. I think I asked my gynecologist about it, and she took a very no pressure kind of, which I think nice. Worked for me. Yeah, for sure. Just being a woman in my 30s in today's society, the conversation's there. So I had been thinking about it, also thinking about where I was in my career and the timing of when I'll be ready to have a kid and what I kind of want to have established for myself before that happens. And then, the dating type stuff.
Yes, which we'll get into next episode. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, it's been almost a year since I've done it.
And how was the whole process for you? I know that's a very layered and complex question, so maybe I'll break it down. Let's start with physically. How did your body handle that? How did you feel your body handle it? And I know you've already shared with me some narratives that came out of that.
Yeah, I think there was always jitters about what it was going to do to my body. I think I had, I probably, having removed myself from the ballet world, I had been kind of really open to, okay, let's just see what my body does with this.
I can imagine too, it's such an intense thing on your body, ballet, and to expect your body to do something very, very different and maybe perform in a certain way that maybe it had when you were dancing.
I also have layered into all of this experiences. I have PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. So I'm quite used to my body not, quote unquote, cooperating with me. I feel like that, I was quite open to, okay, you just got to ride the ride here.
Yeah.
But fortunately, during the actual process physically, I was okay. severe bloating, and it comes with it.
It's so hard to know before you're going into it because you just don't know how and every woman's experience is so different.
Different. Yeah.
Struggles, some, for me personally, like I was really worried about how my body would react, but I did pretty well. Which I was surprised by.
Yeah. I was like really on board with ride the wave. I did have after the retrieval though, was when I had issues. I had really severe swelling. I went in a couple times to have them check it, and they were like, everything's okay. And difficult too, because, they're like heating pad and Tylenol. And I'm like, I think I need something more
than that. Yeah.
I was in a lot of pain for a couple of days. Couldn't lay flat because the bloating
wow.
It was like I couldn't breathe.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was severe. So that was a really frustrating part of it. And my doctors and nurses were all really wonderful, and I felt like they were listening to me, but there was also this element of their hands were kind of tied, like, heating pad and Tylenol was all they could give me. So that was frustrating.
We had an incredible doctor on yesterday, and we were talking about, and maybe you can speak to this too, sort of the mental health component of that, right? There's only so much, when you say their hands are tied, and it seems like there's only so much they can do, even recommend for what you can do post procedure. But I know you'd mentioned feeling really supported, but also on a conveyor belt. And so how did you take care of yourself mentally and emotionally? Were you in therapy, if you don't mind sharing, at the time?
Yeah, definitely in therapy. So that was certainly helpful because I was working throughout the whole process. I think I took a week off after the retrieval. I wish I had taken 2, but
well, I've struggled with that, like trying to do life around the schedule of being at the doctor's appointments and sort of the uncertainty of like, when is the trigger shot? When are you going to, so you can't really, I struggled with that because I was trying to rearrange clients and appointments, and I don't like to do that. So that for me added this other layer of like stress and overwhelm.
Definitely. Yeah. Going into it, not knowing how I was going to respond, not wanting to, disappoint clients because I have my own stuff going on.
Right.
On the one hand, it was great that, you have a 6 a.m. appointment, they take the blood, ultrasound, and you roll out and go about your day. Go about your day. I remember I was like, okay, well, I'll walk across the park on these days, so I have time outside. And towards the end of it, I was like, I'm not gonna make it. I'm too bloated. But on the other hand, just feeling like really kind of robotic.
Because it really is kind of.
It is.
Yeah,
it is.
And how did the support of your therapist help you through that, or what was your support system during all of this?
Yeah, no, my she's great. I think she's always very open. She just wants to hear what I have to say. Very validating. Support system. So it was interesting because it was actually during a COVID surge when I was doing it, and I knew that if I tested positive for COVID, they wouldn't do the retrieval because of the anesthesia.
Oh my God, how stressful.
So it was, I was like double mask in 95s all the time, knew I wasn't going to be around people a lot, just because I was
so you're isolating. You're going through this and really isolating. Gosh.
Super isolated, but I did have, so my friend who is a nurse, she helped me with the first shot. I was like, I'm so scared of needles.
Oh, me too.
I was like, there's no way I can do this.
Me too.
She helped me with the first one, and once for me, like once I had done it, and the more I did it, I was like, okay, I got this. I learned that, if you put ice on it before, it's not as bad. The trigger shot, and I did have this thing of like, I want to do it like on my own. That was a thing for me.
The trigger shot.
All of it. All the shots. Yeah. Once I like got a handle of it, I was like, this is your thing.
I felt that way too. Like, I want to do this on my own, but I was in a relationship, and my therapist at the time encouraged me to have Rob included on that, and I did not want that. I was kind of F this. I'm doing this on my own, and I was grateful that she did, but it wasn't my initial thought to have him be a part of it. So I relate to what you're saying, but maybe tell me more for you. Why was that like important for you to do it?
I don't know. It might tie into some of the like the dating and some of the, I think, definitely want to talk about like the conflicting emotions I experienced.
Yes,
but,
for sure.
That I just felt kind of fiercely that if this is something I'm going to do, like I'm doing it for myself. I've been really thinking a lot about, the shift in the expectations of it all. I always expected I'd meet somebody, I'd do it with them, it'd be this like, heterosexual family unit. And, but really coming to terms that it might not look like that. And kind of the first step if I'm a single parent is, this. So
And I think that's such an excellent point. I think that's what I really want conveyed through all these episodes and from sharing my story too, is that the path usually doesn't look like we expect it to look.
Yeah.
And just the challenge, and for me personally, the challenge for me to accept that had been really, really hard. And I think that's the first piece of it, is reconciling that it doesn't look how I planned. It doesn't look how other people's looks, and that comparison piece really coming in and being so challenging.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know. I think for me there was I don't know where this comes from either though, but kind of a sense of pride that I was doing it alone. I don't know.
Yeah, I think
or worse. I was like, if I can do this, like,
there should be a sense of pride.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think for me, I didn't have the opportunity, or I didn't feel that because I was so stuck in doing it with a partner that I knew I felt that I would be with, and we are still together. So I think I felt that very little, but it was overshadowed by everything else.
Well, and I wonder, and Hannah, I wonder if that was a shift for me, because I didn't have a choice. I was single. I was alone. My family doesn't live here. We were in a COVID surge. Like, if I was going to do it, that was it. So, maybe there's a little like confirmation bias or something like that of like, well, you better just kind of buckle up and be proud of it. So I don't know. I imagine there was a shift in probably some of the work I did with my therapist. Now I think it was kind of mourning, you know, the expectations, what I thought it was going to look like.
That's a great way to put it, like the grief, like processing the grief of that.
Yeah. Which, there's certainly a bit of a mourning process in that, but...
So after you, I think there's a mourning process in all of it, not just the egg freezing.
I would agree. Yeah, I would agree.
I do want to get to the conflicting emotions, but sort of what was the initial, once you're done with the process, what were you feeling after having completed it?
Yeah, so that's interesting. And I think I had noted to you, well, first of all, going through the pain of my body recovering from it, just because for whatever reason my body wasn't happy with the retrieval. I paid the storage fee for my eggs. I don't even kind of know where they are in the city.
I don't know where mine are either. I don't know where mine are either.
I don't know where they are. If anyone knows how to dispose of sharps, let me know, because they're still sitting in my closet.
Well, that's one thing you shared with me too, and maybe we can talk a little bit about that. You still have the medications, and one thing that you noted to me was I just didn't want to deal with it.
I think I was like, wow, you did it, and wanted to kind of wash my hands and move on. And maybe, it wasn't something, I think I had the relief of it all came later.
Not immediately for you.
And I think there's an expectation. I think I had the expectation that I would feel this instant relief. I kind of just wanted to move on. I don't know. I don't know what that's about. I should probably deal with that, because it's taking up a lot of room in my fridge and my storage closet.
I guess that's the therapist in me, where I read that and I'm like, oh, what does that mean? You didn't want to deal with it anymore.
I don't know. Maybe I might bring that up at the next week, because it's still all kind of sitting in the fridge in the closet.
Yeah, and when we had the that was one thing I wanted to ask the doctor that was on yesterday, but we had so many other things to talk about. I didn't get to ask her that. I remembered after we were done, I was like, I didn't ask that. But there's still an opportunity. There's always an opportunity to ask and get more information.
Yeah, I'm curious now. I'm kind of curious to go home and deal with it and see what it stirs up to just be curious.
Yeah. What are some other conflicting emotions? What else came up for you?
I think the anger was the one that I didn't expect.
Yeah, I remember our initial phone call. That was one that you shared, emotion you shared, and this now over a year ago. That was one. Yeah.
There's this huge piece of gratitude. I'm so, I think gratitude is the right word, but super grateful that I have this option. I'm able to preserve my fertility. I can do things more on my timeline. I don't think I would want to change anything. I don't have regrets in terms of, having my whole 20s to myself, being able to start a new career in my 30s.
I know, incredible.
And build that. So grateful this technology exists, but just really angry. Angry.
About?
Gosh. Some of it is the dating.
Okay. We'll get into that for sure.
Again,
I was angry too.
Yeah, grateful. Yeah. Hindsight's 20/20. Grateful I didn't end up with any of the people that didn't work out with. Right. Why isn't this working out? Why can't I find somebody who wants the same thing? I feel like I'm getting into murky territory here, but why can't I find a partner who I don't know, is ready to do the same thing. You know.
Well, I will share, obviously I've been sharing a lot about it's not always the cure-all, because I did find that person and there was still, but this is the point, is everybody's journey is so unique and personal. And so this is why I love these conversations, is just to, you know, talk about all these things. But I had all those same questions, even when I was single. And then that sort of transferred into my relationship, like, why aren't you ready? So now I had a person to say that to, but sort of the same feeling.
Yeah, again, like, I don't regret it. I want to change it. And then I think there's like a broader anger too, of kind of, you know, and we've talked about this too, of like who the burden is falling on. And not that I can think of a better solution or there's another way. That's why it's all kind of conflicting in my head. Totally. Like, I'm not saying there's a better way or anything like that. But I mean, the whole burden is falling onto women. Like, it's wonderful that we can, you know, have our own personal lives longer and dive into careers and all of that. But, you know, emotionally, physically, economically,
yes,
we're kind of carrying the load of it. And
the emotional load is all of that is so extensive and hard. But I think even for me, the emotional piece was such a burden, because I have to think about my biology, but I also have to think about future. And I think in a lot of ways men don't have to think about those things. So even when I'm not actually freezing or thinking about freezing, I'm thinking about, am I going to be a mother? Am I going to meet somebody? And that weighed really heavy on me. Yeah.
There's a timeline. And I was thinking about this, and you know, I don't even know, what are the stats for men? Like, it's kind of crazy that we like know the stats. Like, are there stats? Maybe there aren't.
I don't know.
Like,
that's
you know,
a great
what are
question.
the stats in terms of, you know,
their fertility?
Right. Yeah. Like, why is that not common knowledge and part of the, I don't know. I just thought that was interesting that I had never even like thought about that before.
But that's the whole point. That no one's thinking about that, right? But we're thinking about it constantly.
And I also don't know if this is an advantage or a disadvantage to men necessarily, because I think as women, because of, you know, the pressure, because of the biological clock, and you know, there is this, we kind of do have to sit with these bigger existential questions of like, what do I actually want
sooner.
Yes. What does it all mean? What, you know, values,
where does it all
goals,
fit into, right? Because we do have goals, right?
Yeah.
Where we started is how ambitious and how accomplished you are, and how accomplished every woman on here is. And this idea, I think sometimes too, the misunderstanding, maybe, I don't want to just say men, but is that the reason we're here is because we're so career oriented and so goal driven. And that's not often the case always. It's not just because, we just focused on our careers and we found ourselves in our mid-30s having to do this.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's some anger tied in there for me too. Like, I'm having to deal with this, but it's not that I don't want to, but having, you know, just this is all kind of anecdotal, small pool of like who I've dated, and also having male clients in my therapy practice of, you know, I think there's some advantages of having to be confronted with those questions. There's an aimlessness that I think can come along with not having to confront those things.
Yeah. Well, and even the question you asked yourself entering your 30s, like always thinking sort of with this direction. And I think the one thing that surprised me too, we're talking about conflicting emotions, like how conflicting my emotions were. And I think at that time, we can always dish this advice to our clients sometimes, but not ourselves, like making space for all of it. And this idea that I should feel a certain way or not feel a certain way was really also, you know, there's so many complexities and layers to all of it, which is what I didn't anticipate or expect, because I didn't know anyone that had gone through it. I was going through it, you know, for the first time with not a lot of information or conversation. So that was really tough for me.
Yeah. Oh, I can imagine. Yeah. I had a girlfriend who had done it right before. I kind of knew what I was going into, but definitely the emotional journey of it all was a surprise to me. Yeah. You know, from sadness to excitement to the anger to the gratitude to
all of it. All of it. One thing I want to bring up, and then I want you to kind of share what you would share with the audience, and worth came up in some of our conversations. Is this worth it? And what a big question when you attach it to this process.
Yeah, I think that word, and I talked to my mom and I was like, is it okay if I quote you here? I don't want to And she was like, yeah, of course. Like, but it was a conversation I was having with her when I was trying to decide if I was going to do this or not. And then talking about how much it cost. Did I want to pull that money out of the savings? Was there going to be help? All those things. And one of the questions she asks was, well, do you think it's worth it? And that I just remember like rage.
Yes,
like how dare you ask me to put worth on my potential fertility? But also me like not knowing. I don't know. Like, how do you put a number on this? Like, how many thousands of dollars is it worth? I don't know. She didn't know how to have that conversation with me.
And I think a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
Right. And we've talked about this, like, very well-intentioned and
Yes.
wanting to be supportive, but just not knowing, kind of how to do that.
Yeah. But it's a big question. I don't, and I do have some girlfriends who I guess decide, I don't know if worth is the right word, but who have decided completely against it. They actually feel, that it's kind of a market that's set up to prey upon women's vulnerabilities, and it's a cash cow.
I think there's part of that happening, unfortunately.
Yeah, so they felt very preyed upon.
While it's a really positive thing that there are more benefits offered, I'm learning that some of it is like, the guest I just had on, is part of her package is if they do almost, she says it feels like this BOGO, you buy one, get one.
Yeah.
So it's already this encouragement to invest in even more than one round.
Oh yeah. With my friends who've done it, that's kind of the next question is, oh, do we do it again? Like, now that I've done it. And then having other friends who, absolutely work, they want kids as well, similar age, but just kind of against it.
It's such a personal.
It is.
It's such a personal decision. And this is certainly not a podcast to say you have to do it. This is just a podcast to explore everybody's and share everybody's stories and really be supportive and encouraging of anyone's decision.
I think that's the biggest thing for me, just as a therapist and having other women in my life, and the shoulds and shouldn'ts of women
can be very heavy, so heavy.
Yeah. And, this is what I chose to do as a heterosexual woman in my 30s, and fortunately had accessibility to be able to do it. I could afford it. We just live in a culture of women are just constantly told what we should and shouldn't be doing.
And that pressure is so real, right? And not only do we have it externally, then we have our own narratives and our own things that we say to ourselves that like either buy into that pressure or add more pressure. And it's really hard. And a lot of what I want to convey through this podcast is let's own our own journeys. Let's be proud of our own journeys. Yeah. Let's celebrate our accomplishments. Let's move away from comparison and just be really happy with where we're at. And for me, that was a real struggle, because I was focused on the things I wasn't getting or the things that I wanted that I didn't have yet. Yeah. And I think for me, hindsight, like I have some of those things now. So it's easy for me to look back and be like, oh, why didn't you lean in more and enjoy more? So I think really just conveying this message of like, let's be where we're at. Maybe this is right where we're supposed to be and really lean into that.
Definitely. Yeah. And just because this worked for me and my goals and the things that I want, like certainly doesn't mean it's the right answer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, before we wrap up, anything else any other messages that you would want to convey to the listeners?
I think what we just talked about is the biggest thing, trying, it's tough to navigate, but wade through the shoulds and shouldn'ts and kind of see what's going to work for you. Lean into the support systems that are there for you. Find a therapist if need be. Just kind of be open to where it brings you, because I had a lot of friends who had done it. I kind of knew the best I could what I was getting into, and it came with a lot of surprises, especially emotionally. So
I think that's part of it. I think that's really well said. I think as much as you might know going into it, there's still things that will surprise you and staying open to that. And I think giving ourselves grace as we move through these things is important.
Yeah, grace with all of it.
So before we wrap up, I really want you to share the quote you've shared with me from our very beginning conversations, because it's something that really stood out to you and I think is so relevant and stuck with you through your journey.
Yeah, it did. It was a quote from a reading from getting my master's in the mental health counseling. And it's from a book called Maternal Desire. So the quote is, "Given the emotional, medical, and economic benefit of childbearing that's neither very early nor very late, it seems we would be stumbling over ourselves, trying to rearrange society rather than women's reproductive biology so as to accommodate that timetable." And for some reason, that quote kind of blew my mind, like stuck itself in my head, and going through this whole process just kept playing. And I think that's maybe where some of the anger came from. And I think it was a relief to me to kind of be able to tie it into this this quote. Okay, this is why I'm angry.
Yeah. It really gives that understanding to that emotion.
Yeah, for some reason that just was
it's powerful.
Really logged into my brain. Yeah.
We'll link that book. Well, thank you so much for joining. I know we're going to come back together for the next episode to talk more about dating.
Of course, yeah.
But I appreciate you sharing and being open about your journey and being a part of this from the very beginning.
Of course,
I really appreciate that.
I'm so happy we're doing this. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining Ann and I, and join us for our next episode where we're going to be diving into dating.